Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock, so we'll make a start. Welcome to this morning's Audit and Governance Committee of Dorset Council. My name is Councillor Matthew Hall and I am chairman of this committee. First of all, we'll do a roll call of our elected members. Officers who are present, if you could just introduce yourself the first time you speak during the agenda items. Richard?
Good morning, Richard Biggs. I'm the Vice Chairman.
Susan Cocking, I think.
Apologies from Susan.
Apologies. Councillor Rod Adkins.
Good morning, Chair. Yeah.
Councillor Janet Dover.
Good morning. My name is Councillor Janet Dover. I'm the Coal Hill and Wimborne Minster East member for the area. Thank you.
Councillor Barry Gorringe.
Good morning, Chairman. It's Councillor Barry Gorringe at St Leonard's and St Ives Ward.
Councillor Mike Parks.
Morning, Chairman. Fernand North Ward and present.
Councillor Bill Pipe, I believe, is apologies. Councillor Claire Sutton.
Morning all, Claire Sutton, Rodwell and Wyke in Weymouth.
And finally, Councillor Bill Trite.
Morning, Chairman. Councillor Bill Trite, Swanage.
Thank you. Just to make sure that everybody is aware, we are having a few technical issues this morning, so this might not go quite as smoothly as we all hope. So the apologies have been done. Item 2 on the agenda is the minutes, which we can't do because this is not classed as a formal meeting, so that will be done at a later date. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations? No. Any public participation? I believe not, Kate.
No, Chairman. No, Chairman. Sorry. I'm just trying to sort out these other people that can't get in at the moment. Apologies.
Right, so this is where it might start to go wrong. Right, agenda item 5, audit report on Send Transport to be given and presented by Rupert Bamberger from SWAP. Rupert, are you with us and is your mic working?
I think the answer to that, Chairman, is no.
Right, so
I'm just trying to invite them in another way, so we can hold or move on to another item.
I presume that's the same, Kate, for Sally as well at the moment.
It is. So I'm just trying Sally at the moment.
I'll just hold on for a minute and just see whether what you're doing works, Kate, and if not, if David and Mark could perhaps be prepared to do agenda item 7 risk management update if we're unsuccessful with modern technology.
That's fine, Chair.
Okay, as nothing appears to be working at the moment, we'll move on to agenda item 7, which, as I said, is the risk management update. Over to you, David.
I'll probably come in first, if I may.
Oh, go on then, Mark. I'll let you.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. I'm Mark Out. I'm the Service Manager for Assurance, and within my remit, that includes risk management. I'm joined this morning by David Trotter. He's the Council's Risk and Resilience Officer for this quarterly report that we're presenting to you now. First up, I just wanted to take the opportunity really to thank the committee for its input over the last year or so really in developing this management framework that we have in place. We've tried to work closely with you on this, and I think a really good example of it with the paper that's presented to you today. This is the first time that we've moved to the new scoring approach that the committee favoured, and that's where we look at a score of 1 to 5 for impact on a risk multiplied by 1 to 5 for likelihood, so a 5 by 5 scoring mechanism. We discussed at the last quarter the process for updating risks, and Appendix B details all of the risks using the new scoring matrix. And everything that's identified as high, that's identified by a service level and includes with it a management update from the various risk leads. And I think generally we've had good engagement with the risk leads, and I think you'd be able to see that from the in most cases there's a regular update date included within the update. At the last meeting, it was noted that due to service pressures, there have been some issues with obtaining updates on some of the risks relating to the Place Directorate. What we've put in place is on the 21st of July, we're holding a risk workshop with the Place Management team, and then the Executive Director will be attending the September meeting to provide an update to you all. So that was everything I was going to highlight in terms of introduction. Perhaps if I could just hand back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, if you've got any questions, if you can put RTS in the chat bar, please. Mark, is there anything that David wishes to add to this agenda item at the moment, or are you happy to go straight to questions?
I'm happy to go straight to questions, if that's okay.
Okay, while I wait for any... Oh, yeah. Over to Councillor Claire Sutton first.
Thank you, Matt. A number of questions on different areas. Do you want me to give them all in one go or one at a time?
If you do them one at a time, please, if there's a large number, otherwise I get lost.
Okay, I think that's very sensible. So first of all, I'm so pleased to see the direction of travel in there. I know this is something that I mentioned, and then that's I find extremely helpful. On page 45, how will the new Dorset Care Framework help shape market costs? I couldn't see the correlation between a framework and shaping market costs.
I think, Councillor, Chair, if it's okay, where we've got sort of specific comments on some of the risks, I'm not necessarily sure we'll have the officers in place to actually answer it, but if there are particular questions, maybe I can take those away and then feed back to members afterwards.
That's fine with me. That may well apply to my other questions as well, but I'll put them on record here and now so they don't get lost, if that's okay.
Yeah, good, Claire.
Yeah. The second one is about foster carers, and I've raised this before, but we're still reporting outputs rather than outcomes. So we're still describing what actions we've taken as opposed to what those actions have achieved. And I know this isn't the case, but I think from an external perspective, it might look like that we're actually trying to hide something, you know, in that we're focusing on what we're doing as opposed to the difference it's making. So that is something I've raised several times before, and that's probably not one for this forum. But obviously that thing about reporting outputs rather than outcomes applies equally across, you know, all risk reporting, doesn't it? Obviously the answer to that's yes. So shall I just leave that one for now?
If that's okay, if I can take that away, I mean it's a good point, and I think the management updates will probably vary from update to update, but I think it's a good reminder, and it's one we'll take away and discuss back with the service. Okay, thank you very much.
Claire, I think we got Leslie Hutchinson on, who can answer your first question, I think.
Okay, great, thank you.
Over to you, Leslie.
Thank you. Hi, so I'm Leslie Hutchinson. I'm the Corporate Director for Adult Commissioning, recently joined Dorset Council. So we are implementing and with Cabinet approval a new proposed Dorset Care Framework. And what that framework will have included in it is some set rates that we would expect and hope that our local providers would sign up to. So by agreeing to the rates that we think are the right rates to pay for care, fair and right rates to pay for care, that will help us manage some of the costs that we're putting into the market, because at the moment what we've got is a number of sectors where they aren't necessarily aligned to the costs of care that we'd want and hope to be paying. So by having a framework in place where all providers come onto it and join it, we know what the rate is that we should be paying them, and that will help us shape our market going forward. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's extremely helpful. I mean, obviously there's a lot of detail that lying below that in terms of how those rates are set, but I won't.
That's right. So in terms of helping with that bit, what we're doing particularly for the care home sector, we've committed to be doing a cost of care exercise so that we can look at exactly what the costs are. And there has been an impact of COVID in terms of costs. So we're going to do a very open and transparent cost of care exercise, and that will help us set the rate going forward. What it shouldn't do is change the amount that we're paying at the moment anyway, because actually we're paying for the care already, if you see what I mean. But what that does is help us to get ourselves in a really clearer position with that.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Just one more, Matt.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, that's the last one. Page 52. There's a sentence in here, and I know every sentence in in this document is extremely important, but this sentence is about potential flooding, and the sentence is we may have to relocate coastal communities. Now, obviously, that's of a magnitude that we all need to be acutely aware of. So that's just a comment, really, and that's it from me. Thank you.
Did you want to come on to that, Mark?
I think it's a helpful comment. I think as I mentioned during the presentation on the report, we have got that session with the management team across the place coming up shortly. So that'll be a point I'll take away as part of that discussion, if that's okay.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Matt.
As I say, if any other members have got questions, please put RTS in the chat bar. Mark or David, on page 35, we got some figures for the direction of travel. Now, bearing in mind that we've just now changed from a 3x3 to a 5x5, do you feel that the direction of travel figures have been somewhat skewed by the change in the matrix we're using?
I'll see if David's got a comment as well in a minute, but I think what is quite clear is that because we were previously reporting on a 3x3 matrix, you've got a little bit more clarity now in terms of those things that fall within that high area. So there are a number of things that previously would have been reported as high down to sort of a higher level of medium. So it's a more focused on a smaller number of top level risks. David, is there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
You're on mute, David.
Apologies. I'm David Trotter, Risk and Resilience Officer. If anything, the revised 5x5 matrix actually provides more of an accurate reflection of where we are with regards to risk registers. So if anything, it's actually an improvement. So I know it's been a shift from the number of high risk to a lower number, but it does give a more of an accurate reflection and something we're looking to further develop.
Okay, thank you. When we do, Mark or David, when we're setting up these risks ranking, are we doing that with some form of benchmarking to see whether we're ranking these risks in the same way other organisations are doing, or are we doing that on a personal basis based on the experience that the councils have had?
I'll come in if I may. So in terms of how we've actually arrived at our scoring, it's based on a risk appetite level that was determined at the beginning of this authority as part of the work with the Shadow Authority, identifying those things that would fall within a high risk area. What we've then done is applied either the previous 3x3 scoring matrix and now the 5x5 to that risk appetite discussion as well. Now, within the roadmap that's included within the report, we've identified within there some further work we want to do with both the senior leadership team and cabinet to refresh and review that. Does that help to answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And my final one is, I think it's on page 35 starting. Obviously, there's a number of what are tabled as new risks. Now, obviously, I just would like some clarification as to whether they're truly new risks or what I would class as seasonal risks, because obviously weather can give the council different risk profiles. So are the new ones totally new, or are they ones which come up onto the radar every 6 months or something like that?
I think in a lot of the cases, because of the fact that it is still a developing situation, there'll be some risks that were previously there but haven't been identified, recognised and added to the risk register. So it'll be probably a mix of each, Chair. There'll be some that are identified new risks, others that are new to the risk register, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor Richard Biggs, I think you've got a question next.
Yeah, so it's an observation. It's something I've made yesterday to David and to the team, but not to members. And that is, I think it's excellent. We have gone to the 5x5, but there is a sort of slight flaw in the scoring to some respect, in that if you look at the very first page, which is labelled page 1, which shows the overall Dorset Council scoring, if you look at the left hand where you've got the coloured box there, if you have a critical risk, something that has a critical impact but a very low probability of occurring, it will just show as a green, and you've got 2 in a major. So we could have risks which could cause multiple fatalities, etc. And we still just put those, they'll just be shown as green. When in actual fact, I think normal practice on government have now changed all there, so that absolutely every impact that has a critical impact will be red, no matter what the probability, which ensures that you give real focus to making sure, though it's an unlikely event, you have some fallback plan in place and that it is visible to director level. An example would be, the fire at the refuse depot, pandemic. These are risks that have occurred, which probably would have thought very low, less than 5% probability, and even major. So, I mean, we've got the possibility, we've got a 5x5 grid. You don't need to stick to red, amber, green. You can have red, amber, yellow. You can have you can have 5 colours to give it more. So when you're looking at that to the right, instead of just being banded in that big blob of high, medium, low, we can actually see very high, and that will give you better. We've gone to 5x5. Why not show we've got 5 bandings rather than just 3 blobs? Because everything just tends to sit in the middle invariably, and that will give us, I think, better focus on the areas that we need. So it's not to say you ignore the ones sitting in the green, because they can, if you get enough of them, they can become major ones. But I just think we need to perhaps think about that. I know it's extra work for David and the team, and we're limited on resource, but I think it'd be good for the committee to really make sure that we're really sure about our major and critical impact risks, and we're capturing them properly and giving them due attention. That was already, but other than that, it is very good, I think.
Jeff, I come in again. I mean, I wanted to thank Councillor Biggs, actually, because I think that's a really valid point, and I think we'll take that away. But just more generally, again, to thank for all the input, because it's been really helpful to us as we've been developing this framework, and the various comments have been fed back. We do really appreciate them.
Did you want to come in, David?
Yes, please, Chairman. Just looking at the comments you've raised, in the report, members will note that we've actually added a roadmap, and we're looking to review our current work. We've been looking to develop to the end of this year, and I can take on board totally the Vice Chairman's comments, and I will address that, and I will run that through both yourself and the Vice Chair for it comes to committee as a concept piece of work. With regards to the new risks, we have a large number of new risks because we're getting the risk registers updated now on a regular basis. And I need to highlight that we've got registers now added for business intelligence and digital transformation, which show us new risks. And we're also looking to further develop work with IT and finance. So the risk register will grow and they will be regularly updated. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Mark, just 2 further questions I've just seen. On page 50, risk 212, we talk about the training which is needed. Do we have plans to, and if so, is there a date for making that training mandatory?
Just trying to find the right page, Chair. Which risk is that one?
So that's risk 212.
You want to just bear with me a second? Can you just give me the risk title a second, Chair? Is that okay?
I've just lost that.
Sorry, Mark, it's in corporate services. It's within the high risks.
Is that the high risk? Is it the information governance?
I think
Yeah,
Aiden wants to come in on this one.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, Chair, Aiden Dunn, Executive Director for Corporate Development. So risk 212 is inadequate information governance culture and framework results in a significant data breach. And so it's just a quick opportunity for me to comment on that. I think, first of all, data use of data and and the risk of data breach, it is part of our mandatory training already, and so we've got so each member of staff, when they join the organization, is required to do the cybersecurity training and go through that, and all members of colleagues who are already a member of Dorset Council are monitored on whether they've done that training as well. So we put a real emphasis on that. Secondly, we've also got an ongoing package. We've purchased support from an external company that is regularly testing our systems and sort of testing colleagues, both by providing formal training as well as testing in terms of the cybersecurity. So sort of it feels like a live issue. Indeed, it is a live issue. We had an incident this week of where we were notified by Microsoft of a global threat as part of there was a weakness identified in one of their pieces of software that affected all Microsoft products. So we've had an incident we've been dealing with this week where we've taken appropriate action, and until the point where Microsoft were able to download and provide us with a patch for our systems. So it feels very much a live issue, cybersecurity and data management on that. And just, if I could also a quick shameless plug to and for members, because we've touched on this as an audit committee before, and we've got a briefing next week for all members at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, a briefing on cybersecurity and data. And we're also, there's a set as part of that, we're going to be covering business grants as well. But that'll just give you a bit of a sense or a bit more detail in a sort of a safe environment of what our cybersecurity measures are. So there's a combination of things there, data management and cybersecurity, and they're very much interconnected.
Aiden, if I could just come back on that, it's great to know that training is a mandatory thing, but bearing in mind that, shall we say, cybersecurity is an ever evolving and changing profile within the world of digital, are we doing refresher training? I just have this worry that somebody will do a training course which makes them up to date there and then, and 10 years later the whole world has changed, but not necessarily the training.
Yeah, and if I could, I'll invite Jonathan, if I may. Jonathan may want to comment on this in a second. But yeah, the training is regularly updated. We do insist that people do that mandatory training. But as I mentioned, we've engaged this company, and as members, you might get emails from them called Purple Fish, who regularly email us, and you have to sort of go through a quick training video and then a test as well, just to try and keep it at the front of people's mind. So as well as the formal training, we've got regular updates on our intranet, and it's a growing part of our organisational culture. But if I may, could I hand over to Jonathan for his perspective as well?
Yeah, good morning, members. Jonathan Mayer, Corporate Director, Legal and Democratic. Part of my role is also as the senior information risk owner in the organisation. Just to build on what Aiden has said, that training that all colleagues receive is ongoing in nature. I receive the Purple Fish emails regularly, and it is training which is ongoing, and it's one of those things where by repetition it's reinforced to all of us. My question back to you, Chairman, though, is I don't know if members, and I should know this, I don't know if members receive that same training. If you don't, is that something that you'd like myself and Mark to take outside the meeting? Because the same risks are there for the 82 of you as councillors as there are for staff groups as well.
I think, Jonathan, most of us are now fully aware of Professor Periwinkle, Which,
excellent. You do get those.
Which to anybody watching in who doesn't know that might think we've all gone slightly. But Jonathan, the thing there is somebody maintaining a watch as to members in this case doing it and doing that training on a regular basis?
Right, I don't know, Chairman, but that's something that I think I can discuss with Hayley Caves, because certainly I'll receive updates and Aiden will receive updates about our staff groups and whether people are keeping up with their training. So as well as the individual reminders that people get, we get information collectively about the workforce. We need to see if members are in that caught in that same way.
Yes, because obviously this is, you know, as you highlighted, it's important for us all. And I think as a committee, but also as an organisation, we need to know that the 82 members are participating within that training. We need to have that assurance, because I know that some of mine, for example, have gone into junk.
Right. Well, I'll take that outside the meeting, Chairman.
OK, thank you. Sorry, Mark, I saw you put RTS on the screen. Did you want to come back on anything, or do you think it's all now been covered?
Just very briefly, and apologies, I fully know now which risk we're talking about. But it's the other sort of side of it is the more general data protection regulations training, and that is also a mandatory package. It's one which has got a deadline for all staff to have completed by some point at the end of this month, I think, and that is reported as a key performance indicator that goes through to the senior leadership team and onwards to members via the normal performance reporting.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Jane Sumper, I think you've just put something in the chat bar. You've got a question. Do you want to put that through to officers? I'll take that as a no. OK, Mark, one final question with regards to again page 52, risk 83, which is about the pure checks. It says the system is simple and effective. So therefore my question back to you, if it's simple and effective, why is it red?
Thanks, Chair. I think as I say, we've got a bit of a session to refresh and look at more fully those place directorate risks coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we'll have a proper focusing on that with the various risk leads at that point in time.
But if that's a question that you could take forward to the place directorate for during this training, I would find that most helpful. Thank you. I don't see any other questions coming through from members. So that agenda item was to note and review, which we have done. I believe Rupert and Sally from SWAP are now fully functioning in the digital world. So we'll go back to agenda item number 5, which is the audit report, send transport. Over to you, Rupert, and welcome and apologies for the digital glitches.
No, thank you, Chair, and yes, apologies on our behalf for those slight technical difficulties, but thank you for sorting out so quickly. I'm Rupert Bamberger, an Assistant Director at SWAP Internal Audit Services, so we're the Council's internal auditors. I've hopefully set out the background to the item in the covering report, but just to sort of briefly summarise and recap. It was at the April meeting of this committee that it was requested that an update be provided on our home to school transport audit findings and any progress with the actions that subsequently sort of came out of that piece of work. So I'll provide a sort of brief update on this one from an internal audit perspective, but I understand that officers or portfolio holders will be sort of on hand to answer any wider follow-up questions the committee may have, or perhaps provide a sort of more general update on the area in question. So our original audit review of home to school transport was carried out at the request of the Director of Children's Services, and we finalised our audit report on this in July last year. Our audit did raise a number of findings. We sort of came up with 12 agreed actions with both Place and Children's Services to take forward, and details of all those actions are included in Appendix B of this agenda item. So that was approximately a year ago now. In February of this year, we subsequently carried out a follow-up review, and our follow-up report is included as Appendix A. It was a good news story on the whole that we were pleased to report that quick and sort of proactive action had been taken by the services, with 10 of the 12 actions implemented at that time of follow-up. Since then, we've checked back in with the service and a further action has been implemented, leaving just one priority 2 action remaining from the original 12, and the expected implementation date of this is now October this year. And then you'll see that action on Appendix B, but it relates to the billing and reconciliation process for home to school transport. And again, just to provide assurance, as part of our standard follow-up process, we'll obviously check back in with the service regularly on this until we're satisfied that it's been addressed. So I wasn't intending to go through each sort of finding or action in any more detail than that, given that they're all set out in the report, but obviously happy to provide any further details or answer any questions at this stage from an audit perspective. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rupert. Members, RTS in the chat bar if you have any questions. So Rupert, I'll start, and this might be for you and it might be for officers who are present. On page 17, just for confirmation, it says about a Send Travel Finance Monitoring Group. I presume that reports to the senior leadership team.
Were you okay to take that one, Matt, if you're able to? Thank you.
So, good morning, Chair. Matthew Powers, Corporate Director for Transport for this meeting. It reports to me, Chair, as Corporate Director, and it goes through the monthly reporting through finance, which then feeds into the quarterly month reporting structure.
Thank you, Matt. As you're on, another question. As the trapeze system is considered now to be not fit for purpose, do you have a timescale for its replacement, or are you only just starting that process?
So, if I can give you a general update on our transformation project, if I may, Chair, which might be helpful.
So, thank you.
Dorset Travel, which works within the Place Directorate, is one of the first transformation programs to look at our travel offer for our 10,000 children and adults that we transport every day. Within that, we have a number of work streams that we are working with our portfolio holders, both in children's, adults and place. So first of all, we have what we call our Send travel offer, and that's about looking at how we transport our children within Dorset and outside of Dorset, the support we give them through our pastoral assistance, and also determining what transport offers should be for the future, and particularly in transition between children and adults. That links into what we are calling our independent travel training program, and now we're working with colleagues and children's adults about developing a criteria to identify potential candidates of children and young adults who can actually help them in independence of moving through as they grow up. And it's about using and utilising public transport where we can as we go through. The point you just raised, Chair, we are looking at a new system procurement. And the reason is what we've looked at is the whole system in a detailed way that actually understands all of the travel and transport aspects. That's mainstream, public, SEND and adults. And we have now working with colleagues within corporate services to put in place a new procurement. That has to be undertaken within the next 12 to 18 months. And the reason being is we need to actually make sure that we can move to our next stage in transformation, which is the digital customer part. So everything we're going to be doing in Transport the Future is customer focused. So we are concentrating as we speak on what we call data and communications to make sure that the systems that we have talk to each other. We have robust financial forecasting, and we work with colleagues and children's and adults as we move forward. So we will be reporting the transformation programme to the performance group and Aiden because it sits within that programme. I hope that helps.
Yes, it does, Matt. Thank you very much. Another question as you're on. In the report, the agreed action says responsibility for checking and approving the monthly Send passenger assistant recharges will be assigned to an individual. sorry if I'm just being pedantic, but the phrase "an individual" worries me. If that "an individual" is off on long-term sick or something like that, I presume that there would be somebody else who is trained, aware of, to the necessary levels. I'll take the nodding of the head as yes, thank you.
Correct, Chair. Sorry.
Yes, okay, no worries. That's it from me. Does any member have any questions? Okay, I don't see any RTSs coming through. Did you have anything, Richard?
Well, if you give me an opportunity, I guess perhaps just pick up that point that Matthew Parr said about customer focused, which I think is great. My concern is, will there be an opportunity, because not everybody I know moving that way is digital, and I often get customers frustrated because they can't speak to a human being, they haven't got internet access, or all the skills are not fantastic on it, and they just get pushed from one number to another to almost total loop and give up in frustration, and have to then track down their local councillor to try and sort it out, which usually involves having to go to the head of service, you know, in benefits or whoever, to get it resolved.
So the answer is no, it's not all digital, Councillor Biggs. You know, you've got to look at a personalised service in transport, particularly for children and young adults with SEND, special educational needs. And we've also got to work with the parents and carers as well, because it's really important that transport gets it right first time. Because if we get transport right, the school day is far better. So we will be working on that.
Thank you, Matt. Rupert, just to double check, I presume that SWAP will be doing a revisit of this audit at some point in the future, just to dot the I's and cross the T's?
Yes, that's right, Chair. Yeah, so as part of our follow-up process, we'll sort of track that remaining action. So not intending to bring it back in full, but hopefully assurance that we will sort of track that remaining action.
Okay, thank you very much, Rupert, and thank you very much, Matt, for helping us today. Members, that was a agenda item which was to note and review the progress made, so there's no need for a vote on that one. So if we now move on to agenda item number 6, which is the SWAT report of internal audit activity, which is over to Sally from SWAP to present this, and I'm sure she will mention it, but I'll mention it as well. Members, please remember to use the audit tracker. We've got it in the report as a nice little link for you. Please keep an eye on this, because it makes interesting reading. You know what's going on, and it gives you greater detail, because SWAP aren't necessarily now going to be bringing us this full report to the same lengths that has been before, because you have access to this tracker. Over to you, Sally. Morning.
Morning, and thank you very much for that promotion. That was really helpful. Sally White, Principal Auditor, SWAP Internal Audit Services. Yes, this report is a standard update report on the work of internal audit. And firstly, I would highlight that since our last report, all staff that have been redeployed to support the council in its efforts around the pandemic have returned to SWAP and have fully resumed their audit roles. We have been really pleased to be able to support the council by providing this additional resource during this difficult time, but equally are glad that we're now back to full complement. As you will see on page 24 of your agenda pack, our interim audit opinion is reasonable, and this is based on our levels of confidence that actions will be implemented. Previously, we have reported to members that implementation of our actions have been patchy, and as such, we are currently embedding a new process for the follow-up of actions by key directorate contacts in conjunction with ourselves, and we are now able to track this on a continuous basis. We're currently working with our key contacts in the directorates to review some of the longer outstanding actions, and we plan to let you know a little bit more about this process in our report to the September committee. On page 25 of your agenda pack, you can see the audit coverage by corporate risk. But if you do view the tracker itself, you can actually click to see coverage sliced in different ways, for example, by corporate plan objectives. We are currently working with the assurance team as well to help them develop an assurance mapping process that would identify other various streams of assurance that the council receives. And then this will allow us, senior management, and yourselves to identify any potential areas of assurance gaps. Moving on to page 26, there will be fewer changes in the audit plan as we're now planning on a rolling basis and also using a process of continuous risk assessment. And I would highlight the performance measures now show the financial savings identified as a direct result of our work. Since our last report, this figure stands at £111,000. This particular saving has come from our work certifying the COVID grants, and to date we've identified we've certified 3 COVID grants, and for 2 of the grants we actually identified significant underspends. We liaised with service areas and as a result have been able to identify existing revenue spend that could actually be allocated within the grant conditions. As a result, this has avoided the need to return that money to central government and will also have relieved some of the pressures on service revenue budgets as well. On page 27, we highlight the benchmarking that we've undertaken, provide a commentary on the grant certification work, and also highlight the business grant data matching work that we've supported the revenue and benefits teams with. Moving on, there are 2 limited opinion pieces of work that we're highlighting to the committee, and we've included a copy of our 1-page report for members. The 2 reports are contract management and commercialisation, and also management and reporting of fraud. You will note that the reports refer to an appendix, and this is the plan of action that actually accompanies the report. We decided not to include the full action plan so that members could focus on the overview rather than the more sort of detailed aspects of our work. As the chair very kindly sort of highlighted earlier, the committee will notice that this report is shorter than it usually is, and as mentioned, we are promoting our tracker with the committee, and we have been for some time, and as such we do include the links within our reports. We hope that you are starting to use this now as a point of reference, and as such we have actually reduced the size of our reports to you. You'll notice probably that the table at the back of the report listing all our work has gone, and hopefully you'll have had a chance to familiarise yourself with the tracker and can see how this enables you to monitor our work. But of course, if any of you are experiencing any difficulties, then please just email myself or Rupert and we will arrange to demonstrate how the tracker works with you. That's it from me really, but happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Sally. Members, RTS in the chat bar if you've got any questions. Sally, I've got a few, and the first one might be for yourself, but I would probably like Aiden to give a comment as well. Obviously, on page 1 of your report, the follow-up of agreed action plans, and the quote is, as a result of continued low-level implementation of high-priority audit actions. Are you concerned by that? To what level are you concerned by that? And are you aware of specific reasons for that low level of implementation?
Thank you, Chair, and possibly it might be happy for, you know, would be happy for Aiden to chip in at any time. I think obviously this past sort of 12-15 months has been difficult for the council with COVID, you know, different priorities. So we potentially might have expected focus to have been on other areas. As I say, we are introducing a new process for follow-up, and we're getting huge support from the directorate representatives, and we are making good progress in actually following up and identifying that you know, actions are being implemented now.
Aiden, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And if I could just echo Sally's words there. So yes, COVID has knocked us off course for the last 14 to 18 months, and our priority has been sort of supporting our residents and doing the best we can, which has meant that some of these recommendations have understandably had to take a sort of move down our list of priorities. Where the organisation is right now is, whilst there's a sense that some elements of or parts of society are sort of getting back to normal, the organisation does still remain under pressure, in particular in adult care and the volumes coming through children's services, and indeed many of the place-based services are probably the busiest they've ever been, supporting residents and in particular the large number of visitors we've got. So the organisation's still under pressure. But that said, it's really, really important that these audit recommendations are taken seriously. And I can reassure you or assure you that we are taking them seriously. Certainly as a senior leadership team, Rupert and Sally attend senior leadership team certainly on a quarterly basis and occasionally when there are particularly urgent issues, to give us an update of what's happening from an audit perspective, but also from us as a senior leadership team to describe what's happening across the organisation. And together we look at those priorities, and Sally and Rupert highlight to us what if there are areas of concern within the organisation. In addition to that, the members of Sally and Rupert's team are embedded within each of the directorate management teams as well. So so each of the directorate management team has a regular attendee from internal audit whose role is to remind, to emphasise, hold us to account, but also to hear what the issues, the live issues that the directorate management teams are dealing with, and that brings the that sense of agility as well, because the auditors have, as we've just heard from Sally, are able to flex to the priorities of the organisation. So I think that there is something here about moving on from COVID. There's something here about our growing maturity as an organisation as we kind of move on from sort of being set up and trying to sort of run things sort of on a more established basis. But that I can give you the assurance that we take internal audit and their recommendations very, very seriously. And I think you will continue to see an improvement in our response rate as the organisation starts to stabilise.
Thank you, Aiden. I certainly appreciate the pandemic and the last 16 months have been tricky for all, and that in essence other priorities come along. But when we have these high priorities, we must at some point address those and have a roadmap. So yes, I am reassured, and hopefully those will be implemented as soon as is actually possible for them. Thank you for that. My next question really is more for Mark Eyre. Mark, do you wish to make any comments with regards to the management of fraud and reporting final report that SWOP have got on page 7 of their report, which I believe is page 30 of our agenda?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I pick it up? Because I think within the next item, I'm going to cover off the majority of things on fraud, picking up on the areas within the audit. So if you're comfortable, I'll pick it up as part of that item.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. I have no further questions. Does any other members have any questions? Councillor Bill Trite.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a really small point, but in this item and also in the last one, item 5, we bandy about the term SWAP as an acronym. And to any member of the public who shows or wants to take an interest in council business, you know, this looks just like an in-group shorthand, which in a way I suppose it is. Initially, at least, and I know this happens later in the agenda, we spell it out, but really at the start of these papers, we ought to just spell out what SWAP actually is, the audit partnership.
Sally, could you take that on board and perhaps for future just sort of have a banner sort of type thing put in so that members of the public can gauge and understand?
Sure, absolutely will do.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Sally.
Sorry, it is actually in the body copy of a later report.
Yeah,
which makes it clear, but it doesn't happen in these earlier reports.
Yeah,
Only
I think
it's a small point, but it makes it look too in group.
Yeah, point well made, Bill. Thank you very much, Sally, and thank you very much, Rupert, for all your work. And yes, I will keep plugging the audit tracker. Keep plugging, members, audit tracker. Thank you very much. Right, so we now move on to agenda item number 8, which is fraud and whistleblowing. Over to you, Mark Eyre, for this one.
Thanks so much, Chair. So for anyone joining us later in the meeting, I'm Mark Eyre, I'm the Service Manager for Assurance. So the South West Audit Partnership report at the previous item did reference the recent fraud and whistleblowing audit, and we'll cover that within this paper here. The paper is really twofold. As well as that, we'll also provide a very brief update of where we're at in responding to any issues that have been basically a sort of summary of that activity over the last 12 months. In fact, if I just cover that first of all, so over the last year, there were 2 whistleblowing cases that came through centrally to the team. One was an HR-related issue and another relating to safeguarding issues, and the latter of those is still ongoing. In terms of the SWAP report, I've highlighted at section 2 of this paper a summary of the various recommendations that were contained within the full report, and there's a response alongside each of those. Those have also then been incorporated within the wider full action plan that sits at Appendix A of this paper. As you know, South West Audit Partnership do have a process of follow-up, and they have contacted me in the last couple of days to arrange a follow-up on this particular audit, which will be scheduled for late July, early August. There's a second piece of work undertaken by SWAP as well, which is also referenced in the paper, and that's that there's a baseline maturity review that's been undertaken, comparing maturity on fraud across various local authorities. I've included just a small, I haven't really gone into a huge amount of detail because it's something we're still looking at present. But I have included within there one graph which provides a sort of an initial view of how we compare to the other authorities part of that maturity framework. And I think we're the authority where there's one green, there's one red, and the vast majority is in the amber area. And what that's showing really is that we've got a lot of things underway, but they're not yet fully operational. And I think that's a fair reflection. And I think that is something which is then addressed within the action plan supporting this paper. I mean, to be fair, and we've talked a fair bit on a number of the items about some of the pressures during COVID, and that has had an impact in terms of completing a number of these actions, and they've certainly been slower to progress than I would have hoped. But what we have set out within that action plan is an intention to really have a renewed focus, particularly in September when we start picking up in a lot more detail around that baseline maturity review. And if you're happy, Chair, I was going to suggest perhaps probably won't be ready in time for the September meeting, but perhaps if the following one we present back to the committee, providing an update, both in terms of the outstanding parts of the audit, but also in terms of the progress we've made in dealing with the maturity review. The one final point is that the SWAP report also suggested that we should consider a member champion on forward, and by way of this report, we were hoping to propose for your consideration that possibly, Chair, you might consider yourself appropriate for that role on behalf of the committee. And that's all I was going to raise as far as introduction is concerned. If I come back to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mark. Any questions from members? I think I've got a couple, Mark, and I'm sorry, I've got so many different versions of this report, so I can't find the right page. But somewhere in your report, you talk about a training course for the 31st of August. Does that ring a bell to you?
I don't think we reference it within the report. I mean, certainly training is something which we are looking at present, because there isn't a fixed local Dorset Council training package at the moment for fraud. It's one of the key actions. I don't know whether possibly it might be Rupert or Sally may know whether it's a swap related session possibly.
I've just found it actually, Mark. It's point 2.3, finding 2 priority. Officers and members have not received fraud awareness training. Post-audit update added to the action plan. A draft training package is in development with a target date of the 31st of August.
Fine, that's fine, Chair. Yeah, so I'm clear what you mean now. So yeah, so that's really reflecting what I was just saying. So we've recognised that we don't actually have a full training package currently in place, and it's something that's in development. It's been drafted at present. We're looking to complete that bit of work and roll it out as training available to both officers and members.
I think it would be really good, Mark, to get that up and running as soon as possible. And perhaps if you wanted, because I think you said in our pre-meeting that this is really a training programme that started from scratch. So perhaps if you wanted to try it on the Audit and Governance Committee first, you're more than welcome to. I'll drop that one on you as you've dropped this member champion one on me. So
that sounds a good idea, Chair. Thank you.
In 2.5, a central fraud register should be developed with regular KPI reporting. Obviously, the council's still in the progress of developing this full KPI system for the council to keep an eye on and a track of things. Do you have any ideas of what that timeline will be, and will those type of KPIs come to us as a committee?
So in terms of the KPIs, there is one that is currently reported, which goes through to the senior leadership team. And that's just in relation to whistleblowing. What we're looking to do is whether or not there's a wider fraud KPI that should be reported. It probably ties in a little bit though with something identified in the action plan, which is what this report provides you with is details of things that are reported through centrally. I think what we've recognised as part of the working group that we've got in place is that there will be certain things that don't perhaps come through to the central point. So what we don't have at the moment is perhaps sort of like a holistic overview of activity. So that's something we want to address via that small working group. And I think probably for that KPI to be effective, we probably need that holistic. We need that holistic view. So I can't remember whether I put a target date alongside that in the action plan or not. I think it just recognises that it's been delayed at present, but it's part of. So we're looking to have that real focus in the September time this year. So we'll just make sure that we pick that up as part of that timetable.
In the table at the end, it says communications and accessibility, and then there's one where it's highlighted improve accessibility of policy framework from external website, which was due to be done by May 21, and it says overdue. Do you have a time frame of what the new completion date would be?
I do indeed, and it's so in terms of the internal communication, that's greatly improved. The external element of it, it's the policies are available online. They're just not necessarily that easy to navigate. So we definitely need to improve that. We've held back slightly because we are due to actually review that set of policies in the near future. Anyways, there's a number of things that come out from some of the cases that we've been involved in that highlighted areas of improvement within the policy. So I would suggest we're again looking at that sort of September timeline to get that policy updated.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Councillor Richard Biggs, you have a question.
Yeah, I just wonder whether the training is going to be refined so that it's different training for members and for officers, and maybe there will be some joint training, because I think the specifics, and it does mention on page 57, the clear link to the code of conduct. And I'm thinking, you know, for members, it's probably around travel and subsistence planning, you know, gifts and hospitality and favours in kind and all this sort of thing. And there must be plenty of examples, and we've probably all known in our past councillors who've perhaps been caught out, and there are good national ones. I mean, that's what really hits home when you can relate an actual, without naming names, somebody who had to resign because they were claiming they travelled from 2 different authorities to go to the same meetings, things like that. That will be really useful, I think, rather than just a sort of general, you mustn't do this, mustn't do that, because I think everyone has different views, and I think perhaps you need to reflect on, particularly on planning issues and things like that. It's really important to get that right.
I think, Chair, I think that's a really good point, and certainly the training that's referenced within the report at the moment is looking more at that general overview training package that would be available to all officers and members. I think the real key bit that moves on from that is that there will be certain areas where there maybe need to be something above and beyond. There may also be certain areas which are perceived to be a higher fraud risk, where we may need to look at something else above and beyond that training package. But no, it's a good point. Thank you.
Did you want to come back on that, Richard?
No, I just think obviously we need to keep an eye on that. You have a habit of drifting on, and 2 years on we find we still haven't got that. So I would hope within a year or 6 months, ideally, we would have that sort of bespoke training or something, rather than just the general code of conduct training. I think we could focus on the fraud element of, you know, you've still been breached code of conduct, and these are the examples. Be really useful.
Any other questions from any members? Take that as a note. So the recommendations we've got for this one is to note the findings of the SWOP and support the improvement action plan. So we have noted, review the annual update, which we've done that. So we've then got the final one, which is approve a proposal that the chair performs the role of member champion. Jonathan Mayer, do we need to take a vote on this one?
Chairman, I don't believe that you need to take a vote on this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. If any members have got any burning desire to be the member champion themselves, if they could put that in the chat bar. Mark, stop smirking. I can see you. Okay, that's noted, and I will duly take up that position. Thank you very much, Mark. We now move on to agenda item number 9, which is corporate complaints. I believe that's yourself as well, isn't it? I think, along with Jonathan.
I'm going to pass over, if I may, Chair, to Tony Bygrove, who heads up the complaints team, and will lead us through this paper if you're happy.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors, members and colleagues. I'm Tony Bygrove, the Senior Assurance Officer for the complaints team. We're here today to ask for your support to change our current corporate complaints policy to that of a single stage process. Also on the agenda would be for you to note the unreasonable behaviours protocol that we hope to roll out soon, that's already had support in committee. So they're the two things I want to really talk about today. When Dorset Council first started, there was conflicting views on what a fit for purpose complaints process would be, and I need to be clear from the get-go,
that this isn't social care. Social care for children and adults have their own statutory processes. They continue, of course, as normal. This is Dorset Council's own complaints policy. There was some resistance to have a genuine single stage policy from the get-go because some of the sovereign authorities had multiple stages, and there was a nervousness about letting that go and referring matters to the Ombudsman prematurely. In our unique operational experience over the last 18 months, it's really galvanised the complaints team. We've seen a tremendous increase in number. But what we've really seen, and part of our role is to mediate between the general public and key staff at Dorset Council, what we've really seen is we've kind of put an additional level of bureaucracy into a policy that doesn't really help senior managers, and it doesn't really help the general public. So if you're not overly familiar with our complaints process, there's an expectation that team managers will respond in full with a clear and robust response which covers off the complaint, captures any learnings for the local authority, so that hopefully if there is something to put a hand up to, it doesn't happen again. Then there's a review, and this review was almost like a safety net that was employed just in case we got it wrong. And I think my challenge, and something really for me to get across today, is the expectation is that we don't get it wrong in the first place, and that the team manager is experienced, is able to conduct an impartial review, impartial investigation, and write a robust response for the general public. Having a review then would escalate to a head of service normally to essentially do the same thing again and usually reiterate the position. And in our experience over the last 18 months, we've not really changed our mind, and we've ended up referring to the Ombudsman anyway. And I think councillors and members should be really assured that the Ombudsman find very, very, very little fault against Dorset Council. The annual report will show a tremendous increase in number, but actual upheld cases, I think there are about 3 off the top of my head out of the nearly 1,500 complaints that came through the door. So in terms of risk, I'm really confident that we get it right in the first place. In terms of organisational learning, we need to keep encouraging that. And if matters do go to the Ombudsman, they do give us an opportunity to reflect, and senior managers are of course made aware at that point anyway. And if there is an urge to reopen the complaint, I think we've still got that opportunity. So what we're really pitching is to rule out the unnecessary review in the hope that managers are able and impartial enough to investigate thoroughly and respond. The complaints team provide a quality assurance service as part of our function to make sure we feel it's fit for purpose. We feel that we'd be happy to receive that response, and it's robust and it covers all the points. So there is a little bit of a safety net built into the process anyway. And senior managers reinvestigating something that their managers have already investigated doesn't seem like particularly good use of taxpayers' money. So really hope that common sense prevails and we can get your support for a single stage process. Before I move on to the unreasonable behaviours protocol, I wonder if we want to dwell a little bit on this and whether there's any questions or concerns about the notion of a single stage process. And as I say, this is very much more geared towards corporate and place complaints, less children and adults which have got their own process.
Councillor Biggs, I think you have a question.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent idea. My concern is that managers will still pass a copy of their report on to their head of service. I find it hard to believe that they would not involve them at all. They would be very nervous if they took a view one way or the other. I would like to think there's that level of trust, but I suspect, knowing most organisations I've worked in, there's always that, well, I need to see it before it goes out, something serious as this, and our head of service is really going to sit back and have something that may be slightly more embarrassing than they would if they'd reviewed it. I mean, it should be good. If it doesn't, I think that that danger of watering it down slightly and being slightly less embarrassing. But I suppose the other thing is to put a tight, what's the time frame around it stop that? You know, if you are there clear timescales in which the review must be done by the line manager, whoever it is?
Yeah, I could certainly cover those points off. At the moment, we have 20 working days to get the response out the door. That includes the quality assurance, and it's really important to note that the complaints team sit in assurance under Mark and Jonathan, and it's an independent eye we provide, so it's fit for purpose when it goes out the door. So we should be assured by that. Heads of service, from my own experiences, trust and feel quite frustrated by the fact that there is a review. If matters are referred to the Ombudsman before the reviews, the Ombudsman just bat it back and say do a review. And normally it really feels like bureaucracy, and I don't think that really benefits the general public or senior managers and staff, because we really want people to get the independent eye of the Ombudsman as soon as possible, really, because complaints can go on and on if we keep having a get out of jail free card. I think that the expectation is to do a really good job of the investigation and response in the first place. And heads of service will become aware if the Ombudsman becomes aware, and there'll always be that opportunity to us to review if we feel that at that point it isn't fit for purpose. But the team managers and the level of seniority that we're pitching complaints at, I think, are more than qualified, in my opinion, to be able to answer the queries, see if it's a justified and upheld complaint, and if there is a challenge, rest assured the complaints team we challenge a lot.
Good. Well, I'm sure that the committee would welcome the streamlining of it. I think that's in the public interest, isn't it? Providing we get the result, good results and good fairness across the board. I think that's got to be a good thing. Thank you.
Tony, I've got a couple of questions myself. I mean, I'm sure that some of this is driven by both, but is this, from a council's point of view, a process that's been driven by the level of complaints by people about our process, or is this a reaction to the amount of time that it's taking officers to do things and it's a repetitive process? What has led the council to do this?
In my own view, this was a problem from the get-go before COVID. I think what COVID has done, and the resulting increase in complaints, it's further galvanised my view that the single stage process was always the right move. I was very firmly in favour of a single stage process from when Dorset Council first started. So it's operational experience. I've not yet seen a review go out the door that doesn't reiterate the initial position, and I think that is as strong an answer as I can give. If there was any evidence that we were saying actually we've completely got the wrong end of the stick here and sorry, if we'd seen any evidence of that, then I don't think I'd be here in quite the same confidence. It really feels like we're adding bureaucracy, which is frustrating customers and it's frustrating senior staff.
Thanks, Tony. The other question was, and it might be for Mark, but it covers both of these appendices really. We're doing this to achieve certain things. Are we therefore thinking that as an organisation we will come back in a year's time to review the changes that we're proposing today to make sure that they are achieving what they are supposed to achieve?
And I don't know whether you want me to answer that one, but my strong feeling is we're guided by any reputational damage or maladministration found by the Ombudsman, and I think Dorset Council councillors and members should be really assured that our track record is brilliant. So I'm quite confident that the quality of the work that's going out the door is of a high standard with that safety net that the complaints team and assurance provide. So in terms of would we revisit it, yes, if we see a change in trend, but at this stage, in my operational experience over the last 5 years, our complaints are going up and maladministration is going down, and that's a fantastic trend to support.
Did you want to add anything, Mark?
Yeah, if I can, just very briefly, and that is really that it is a process that we will obviously continue to monitor. So if we find any adverse reaction to the what we're proposing within the support of the changes of policy, then we would look at that again. But I think as Tony said, we are pretty confident with the approach we're suggesting.
Thank you, Mark. Tony, we've got no other questions on this one, so do you want to move on to the unreasonable behaviour one?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, briefly, this kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with our complaints process, some of our experiences, and not just in the complaints team. I think across Dorset Council, we're seeing more and more behaviours which are becoming more unreasonable. I think some of the frustrations experienced by the general public who are perhaps working from home and observing a lot more services they perhaps didn't even know happened, or perhaps behaviours from their neighbours that they perhaps didn't realise happened because they'd normally be at a workplace rather than at home. And it feels that Dorset Council has been under significant scrutiny during COVID, just because people can, and the absence of things to enrich one's life, we're seeing quite a lot of energy and effort being put into crusading against Dorset Council over matters which perhaps have already gone through the complaints process and had an outcome, or just repetitive behaviours to vent frustration. And I think in some people's view, Dorset Council is a building in Dorchester that isn't actually populated by human beings. So it sits alongside an HR process for violence, aggression and harassment at work. It sits alongside the customer services customer promise that calls to respect when dealing with Dorset Council staff. And we've got a duty of care. We need to be really, really clear. I know it is clear, but it's easy to forget that as public servants, we still do need to be considered with respect and interacted with respect and courtesy. And there have been occasions where that line has really been blurred over the last 18 months. So this policy is really for Dorset Council staff, as well as something which is transparent for the general public. It's something to refer to, and it's something that makes it clear what unreasonable behaviours are. It's really clear that it's an absolute last resort. It's not something that we'd waive and threaten the use of. It's something that we have if we feel that behaviours are getting to a point where they're no longer reasonable. So if you haven't already had a good look at that, I'd ask you to cast your eye through that and bear in mind that it's a policy that we wouldn't use as punishment necessarily, but it is something that manages behaviour, particularly with references to maybe a single point of contact, which provides a consistent approach to dealing with things, or a consistent message, because a lot of the unreasonable behaviours we're seeing are scattergunning. I'm quite sure some of the stuff in the complaints inbox, you sort of councillors and members will be seeing the same names, and across Dorset Council we're probably seeing the same names, and maybe it's not clear and centralised a clear strategy to manage people. And I don't like the idea of managing people lightly, and I think it is very much a last resort, but there does need to be something in a process that Dorset Council have that protects the well-being of staff, and we've really seen an increase in unreasonable behaviour. People with single points of contact at Dorset Council have risen 200% in the last 18 months. And the amount of officer time it takes to manage unreasonable behaviours is extraordinary, and been quite heavily involved. A lot of my time actually is now dedicated to trying to protect senior members, the chief exec, from these levels of behaviours and the amount of time that it takes to manage. So I don't want to go on too much about this, because it's something I feel quite passionately about, but I think Dorset Council need to be aware that there is support and there is a point where things become unreasonable. So it's really just to note that and take any questions that you might have on the protocol rather than policy.
Thank you, Tony. First question from Councillor Claire Sutton.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Anthony. That's I agree with your analysis, and I'm extremely supportive of your approach. You know, I think we can all identify the trends that you've been commented on, and I think a key aspect of this is ensuring that staff at least feel that we're doing our best to protect them. Whether the policy, obviously it's not going to solve all the issues, but that's much appreciated. My question was about that to what degree unreasonable complaints have increased, and you did give a number just then. I think you said 200% increase in first points of contact, but could you just flesh that out a bit so we can understand the magnitude of the problem a little bit better, as opposed to just the sort of qualitative narrative?
Yeah, of course. So, and the complaints team only know what we know, and I think this is a systemic issue at Dorset Council. I suspect there's trading standards with a list of people that they've got concerns about. I suspect there's children's services with records on Mosaic with people that they've got concerns about. And I think what the unreasonable behaviours protocol will do is centralise and make accessible, obviously with data protection in mind, something which will forewarn people. In terms of numbers, I think it was pre-COVID we had 12 people with single points of contact. I think there's about 30 something there, about 36 people that were managing through a single point of contact. And without offering too much in the way of sincere thanks to Matt Piles, but it's those single points of contact are usually me and Matt Piles. Because of the nature, because Matt's so involved with services that people see, and because the complaining nature of what people are bringing to the table, I'm quite often involved, and it's a tremendous amount of time. So I think it's something to be supported. At the very least, we need something centralised so we're all aware of the full impacts that people are having across the directorates, because it's not all centred around one service. I think a lot of the time we're seeing behaviours about just anything that they see that they then come back to Dorset Council about, and I think it almost becomes a hobby. It feels like it's become a hobby for people to try to get that feeling of getting one over on the local authority, and that's not always the best use of our time. That said, sometimes there's a kernel of truth, and there's sometimes a kernel of a point in what the feedback is. And again, the complaints team's job, together with the panel that would make any decisions on unreasonable behaviours, it would be a panel. We need to be clear about that. It's not one person's view. We need to make sure that it really is unreasonable behaviour, because once you tear away the noise, quite a lot of the time, as we all know, there is a point behind it. Yeah. They're just perhaps not expressing it in the right way. So we need to not lose sight of that. But equally, people need to put their point across in the right way for the well-being of our staff.
Thank you very much. Can I make one more comment, Matt?
Of course.
There's obviously a role for members in this, and I know that I for one, I do try and protect officers and try and shield officers when people are coming to me with issues that either seem to be unreasonable or seem to be targeting the wrong person. And I hope, I'm sure most members are doing the same, but I'm not sure. I'm wondering if there's something we could think about here in terms of actually advice for members to help with this process in actually, minimising or mitigating the impact on officers directly. There's no answer to that now, but that's just something that's given me pause for thought. Thank you.
There probably is a little bit of an answer that springs to mind, because there are processes in place for people to get their voices heard. The complaints process that we discussed earlier is one of them. And I'd encourage councillors and members to refer people to the complaints process. It's really easy to find, and certainly the numbers make it clear that people don't have a problem finding the link. So we get absolutely bombarded with feedback. So some of it's good, and some of it is a bit more of a crusade. But I'm confident that people know how to complain. So I'd encourage councillors and members to point people in the direction of the corporate complaints team first, before getting too involved, because that process is there for us to self-assess whether or not we've acted correctly, whether there's anything to learn. And there's the ombudsman.
But forgive me, Anthony, I'm talking about even before we get to that point, actually members behaving in such a way that you can hopefully close some issues down before they even get to the complaint stage. That's what I was talking about. But thanks very much.
Oh, sorry.
I think, Tony, if I could just follow on actually from what Claire was saying there, because the one thing that springs to mind is there isn't necessarily within this the link between council officers and elected members, because you've got an issue where you're raising the point that an officer could have or experience violence towards them. So you could have a situation where that person then goes to their local ward member, and you could potentially have the same situation, but we don't appear to have within this the ability for a local ward member to be made aware of that an incident has occurred and that they need to be cautious.
I think that's a really good point. We've got the current software. I think there's a light version that's shared with councillors, which have the names and wards of people that are demonstrating unreasonable behaviour. But I think there is probably a little bit of work to do in terms of capturing everything, because the unreasonable complainants list that the complaints team manage probably doesn't, well, I know that it doesn't capture everything in terms of what, perhaps instruction for social workers or in-house visits, or instruction for DWP for their house visits, don't go there alone, that kind of stuff. That I think needs to be captured in one centralised area, and then it can be shared with councillors and members. So I think the protocol is one thing, the software that supports that is another, and there's to my mind what we currently have probably does need to be improved upon, so that we're capturing everything that we don't know about. So the complaints team only know what we know, and I think there needs to be a culture across Dorset Council to be aware of the protocol once it's rolled out, to know why it's there, to not abuse it. It's not a get out of jail free card from doing your day job, but at the same time we need to be clear that Dorset Council don't tolerate violence, aggressive, unreasonable behaviour, and there are policies that protect people. So I hope that answers the question. I feel like I've rambled towards the end. Sorry if I have.
No, thank you. Councillor Mike Parks.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Claire's actually covered quite a few of the points I was going to make, but I'm really pleased to see the single point of contact process coming on there. But just a couple of points on it, really. One, we need to be balanced on how we put people onto there. So what we don't want to do is default to just putting people on there just because they, keep poking at the council to try and get some answers. So it needs to be balanced. But the kind of flips that I also want to see that actually members are recognised as potential targets as well. And I take the point that Claire made about actually members can sometimes head this off at the pass, but we also get people that will not let go. And I know an example of a councillor locally who's getting perhaps 3 or 4 emails a day at times from an individual over a particular issue. So there needs to be a process where we can actually protect members as well and get those people on the single point of contact from a member point of view as well.
No, of course, and I think there is an opportunity, and I'm more than happy to devote any time that the councillors and members would want in support, because managing these behaviours we've got a tremendous amount of experience with, and I completely agree with what you're saying. I don't think it's something that we would take lightly, and it's certainly not to bring out the unreasonable complainants policy, because we don't want to deal with this person anymore. If they are that tenacious, quite often it's because we've missed the point. So I wouldn't want to miss that opportunity, and that's why the proposal for single points of contact would always be a panel of people. I would expect to have a seat at the table. I would expect a service manager to have a seat at the table, possibly the head of service for that area, and at some point, depending on what level it's coming in at, so you'll notice that there's 3 levels of the protocol. It may be that it's actually straying into sort of harassment, in which case we might ask somebody from legal to join us to discuss it. So it's quite robust, and again, I think it would be a breath of fresh air for people to know it's there, but it's certainly not in any way a get out of jail free card from doing the day job and doing it well.
Did you want to come back on anything there, Mike?
Yeah, if I may, please, Chairman. You know, I totally take those points on board, and you know, I appreciate that quite often perhaps we do miss the point of what the complaint was about. But when you are dealing with individuals that perhaps we've answered and we said actually there is nothing further on this we can do, and actually the council is in the right. At what point do we stop engaging with those people?
Yeah, again, I think this. To my mind, it depends. I wouldn't want to give a straight answer because I think it can depend on the subject matter. It can depend on whether or not it's gone through the complaints process. And I come back to councillors referring people to the complaints process because I think I'd want the assurance that the local authority have considered it, have taken it seriously, and have referred the matter to the Ombudsman. And ultimately, if we can get the independent eye of the Ombudsman on a matter, I think at that point it's reasonable to stop communicating because it has been considered thoroughly and we've got that external assurance. But I'd always come back to a process. I think I'd feel that the transparency of knowing that we've acted correctly and having completed a process would always dictate how we manage behaviours. Which is why, yes, heading it off at the pass, absolutely, if you can. And I think, again, the complaints team will always look to do this. You know, if there is a quick win or if there's a pick up the phone, I'd always look to do that. But there are times when processes need to be completed for the good of the well-being of staff here, as well as for the satisfaction of the individual that's making the point. And the Ombudsman sometimes, although we don't refer people to the Ombudsman lightly either, but sometimes it's necessary.
Thank you. Jonathan Mayer?
Chairman, that's fine, thank you. What I was going to say 5 minutes ago has been covered off in the answers to the questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Councillor Richard Biggs.
Well, I'd just like to amplify, I think, what Mike has said. I think that, you know, that there is something missing here, that it doesn't, that I could see, mention members, and they are part of the council, often the first point of call before people go to officers. And, you know, sending multiple emails, leaving multiple, you know, I've had that with one individual, over 100 emails. Okay, it was over quite an extended period of time, but they were long, detailed, that required detailed answers. When you answer them, they come back another way. And in the end, I said, there's nothing more I can do. I won't be responding. You know, that's really difficult. It's the first time I've ever done that. But he will still time to come in and just try and tease you in again with something, you know, and it is sort of harassment in a way, but I know it is difficult for elected members as that different role, and it is perhaps a personal judgment as to how you do that. But I think some guidance, you know, it becomes unreasonable, and I guess social media is very much part of that problem as well, but it can be quite stressful. You know, I find this particular case quite stressful, which is unusual.
Jonathan, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just to say, Chairman, we will absolutely support members, whether that's through Tony and the team or through senior managers. We will support you around those difficult decisions that you might have to make around contact, because we do recognise that it is different for you. As elected councillors, you're in a different position from officers, but it is still the case that you should not be subject to what can sometimes amount to harassment. So we can step in and support you. And sometimes that is around very practical measures, especially around contact by email, where we might have to put things like redirects in place to reinforce that you are no longer going to engage with someone. So we can support you with all of that.
Did you want to come back on anything, Richard?
No, that's fine, thank you.
I don't see any other questions coming through. Tony, is there any other final points you wish to make?
Not really. Just to amplify Jonathan's view. You know, I think we really do appreciate that you're human beings as well, and you're under incredible pressure in your inboxes too. And I suspect some of those names are the same names that we deal with directly. So we've got quite a lot of operational knowledge in dealing with these characters, and if we can help, I'd hope you come to approach us.
Thank you, Tony. Jonathan, we're being asked to approve the revised whole authority complaints policy. Do you need us to take a vote on that?
Chairman, I don't know if it's so much taking a vote, but if members wish to deal with it by, I think the technical term is approbation, but in terms of taking it forward, then if you want to signal your support, then under the arrangements we're currently operating with this as an informal meeting, I could then make a decision using my delegated powers if you as a committee do signal your support.
Thank you, Jonathan. So members, is there anybody that opposes approving this revised authority complaints policy? If so, please speak now. I'll take the silence as a no, Jonathan. So over to you for that one then, please.
Yeah, but in that case, and with the benefit of the clear messages of support that we've heard from the committee this morning, I'm happy to use my delegated power to approve the revised whole authority complaints policy, that move to a single stage process, and then to note the revised arrangements for managing unreasonable behaviours that, again, I've heard members supporting this morning. Thank you.
The only thing I would like to add to that, Jonathan, it does seem to me from members' comments that members themselves are slightly concerned about behaviours that they might experience. So perhaps it might be something that Dorset Council can look at, with either providing some written help, or whether some telephone numbers or the right people to contact, some further information, because I think members are feeling that there is issues out there, and they would like the reassurance of knowing who they can turn to.
Yeah, and I think, Chairman, we can certainly provide that information and that support for all 82 members. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you, members. We will now move on to agenda item number 10, which is on prevent, and I believe that's our officer Andy Frost who is dealing with this one for us. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Chairman. So Andy Frost, I manage the community safety team in the Adults and Housing Directorate. The focus of this item really is to get agreement from the committee to include details of a new council function in the Constitution, and that's coming as a recommendation from People and Health Overview Committee. But I'll give a bit of context behind that, Chair, because this isn't a particularly well kind of understood or known area of work or council business. So local authorities are under legal duty to help prevent people being drawn into violent extremism. So there's a number of things that we do in relation to that. We have to work with our partners to assess and respond to risks locally. We undertake and coordinate training for staff, and that includes training for staff in our kind of commission services. So all of our contracts for provider services include the requirement to have staff trained around this kind of area of work. We do work to make sure local authority resources aren't used to promote extremism or access extremist material. So our IT systems, for example, or the use of computers in libraries or use of council kind of buildings. And relating to what we're talking about today, we lead work on channel panels. So channel panels are multi-agency practitioner groups. They come together when someone has been identified as being at risk of being drawn into extremism, and the agencies in that channel panel put together support packages to steer those individuals away from extremist activity. They've been around for a while, but in November 2020, the government issued new statutory guidance for channel panels. And the guidance make local authorities much more responsible for leading and coordinating those panels. The new requirements include having named chair and deputy chair appointed by the council's chief executive. that the chair and the deputy chair need to meet certain core competencies, and then there's work in there. There's things in the statutory guidance around governance. So we need to have clear governance arrangements in place. That includes including the terms of reference for our channel panel in the council's constitution, which is what we're dealing with today. We've also made arrangements to take annual reports to scrutiny committees, so members have oversight of our work around channel and prevent. So we took a paper to People and Health Overview Committee on the 4th of May to discuss our work on prevent and channel, and they agreed to recommend to Audit and Governance Committee that terms of reference are for channel were included in the council's constitution. So that's really the kind of that's what we're talking about today, Chair. The other thing I will just mention briefly, because it's an area that's being very much promoted by central government, is the role of elected members within this area of work. We did make training available on prevent to all councillors when Dorset Council was first formed, but following a discussion at People and Health Overview Committee, we've now sent details of the Home Office online training to all Dorset councillors. We are working with Democratic Services to get that as part of the required training for councillors. And we've also shared the Home Office Prevent Elected Member Handbook with all councillors as well. So we've kind of responded to that discussion at People and Health Overview Committee. Hopefully that's a good introduction, Chair, and if there's anything that people need to ask, then please do.
Thank you very much, Andy. First question is from Councillor Claire Sutton.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Andy. What was I going to say? Yes, obviously we have to fulfil all our statutory responsibilities in relation to this, in relation to what's coming down from central government. But I want to be confident that what we're doing is proportionate, because there's a lot of staff investment here. There's a lot of scrutiny investment here. And I'm not saying that's inappropriate. However, what I do feel we need to know is, rather than just say, oh yes, we're doing all we can, we need to know what the scale of the problem is in Dorset. So if we're only talking about 1 or 2 people, arguably this might be overkill. And secondly, the nature of the problem in Dorset. So are we talking more faith-based groups, more far-right groups? Understanding the nature of what we're dealing with, I think, is very important to how we invest in this. Thanks.
Andy?
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we do take a proportionate response to this issue. I mean, I can't obviously go into too much detail about specific issues, and some of that will come out when we go to members through scrutiny committee. But what I would say is Dorset is considered a low risk area in terms of this area of work. That doesn't mean to say, well, we haven't had issues and we need to be prepared to respond to issues. And we have run channel panels in the past, but in some ways what we're doing is we're responding to what we need to do, but we are doing that in a way which is proportionate.
Did you want to come back on anything, Claire?
No, that's fine. It's just something to keep an eye on, because obviously, we can always do what we're told, and sometimes we can do more than we need to. I know that might be a slightly controversial comment, but yeah, thanks.
Andy, obviously you spoke about elected members' role in this, and there's a whole lot of documentation that is available as guidelines, etc. Is that something that you're planning to get out to the 82 members, either as a link or as the whole document?
Yeah, so we've already sent the Home Office's handbook out to all councillors, Chair. So that's gone out. We've also sent out a link to the online prevent training. So we've done that, and that's gone out. I think Democratic Services are looking to make that as a required training as well. So we've done that.
I haven't received that.
Oh really? Okay, I think it went out in the portfolio holders newsletter to all members, but I can send that again, Chair.
If you could, yeah, because I'm usually pretty good, and I think Councillor Mike Parks has just put that he hasn't received it either. So okay. Perhaps if you could.
Yeah, sure. I know it's gone out through Councillor Carr Jones's regular newsletter to members, but we'll make sure it goes out in other routes as well if that hasn't been received by everyone.
Thank you. Any other questions for Andy from members? I take the silence as a note. Jonathan, is this another one where we give you a minded to type decision?
Yes, please, if you could, Chairman, and then I can deal with it under the delegation. And it does feel incredibly awkward dealing with it in this way, because of course you're the elected people who should be making the decision. It's just the unusual circumstances that we're operating in this morning.
Thank you, Jonathan. So members, do any of you have any objections to the proposals? I take the silence as no, Jonathan. So,
Chairman, in that case, I'm happy to exercise my delegated authority to amend Article 11 of the Council's Constitution to include the new statutory channel panel and its proposed membership in terms of reference as set out in the paper that you've just considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jonathan. Members, we now move on to agenda item number 11, which is the forward plan. Do any members have any points that they wish to raise about it? The only thing I would like to say, Aiden, I presume you'll touch base with Susan Dallison to get the quarterly figures programmed into the work schedule?
Yes, Chair, I will. Yeah.
And Mark Eyre, can I ask that you also touch base with Susan for the calendar year, if there are any future reports that you have in mind to bring to us, because these agendas tend to fill up pretty quickly, so the more notice we have, the better.
Will do, Chair.
I don't see any other points from members, so we'll accept that and move forward to agenda item number 12, which is urgent items. Jonathan, I believe you have something that you wish to cover in this.
Chairman, sorry, I think that might have been a misunderstanding this morning. If Constitution had been on the agenda, then I would have covered a quick update on some changes to the Constitution, but I can do this at your next meeting.
Thank you, Jonathan.
It's not urgent.
Kate Critchell, can I ask that either yourself or you touch base with Susan to make sure that that agenda item is on the next one, please?
Absolutely, Chair, of course.
Thank you very much. I believe there are no exempt items. Is that correct, Kate?
Yep, no exempt items.
Thank you very much. Right, members, at 11:47, that's the end of the meeting. Thank you all very much for taking part. Thank you, officers, for all your time. Thank you, members of SWAP, and have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and goodbye.
Thank you, Chairman.